I'm here today with Rob Karner, watershed biologist for the Glen Lake Association, and Ron Rymick, owner and founder of Freshwater Solutions. Good day, gentlemen.
Good day, Laura.
Hey, good day.
So let's talk about swimmer's itch in northern Michigan and the results of the intensive research you both have been doing these past few years. Rob, we'll start with you. You've been working towards solutions to the swimmer's itch issue for the Glen Lake Association for decades. Take us back in time, if you would. What key milestones have we passed in terms of swimmer's itch control over the years?
Well, we first, back in 1977 when I got involved, if you can imagine this, we put copper sulfate in the water in the shallows, and we tried to kill all the snails. And we put a lot of time and energy into that. And the interesting thing was that we kept getting swimmer's itch, despite all that, putting copper sulfate in the water. And I said to myself, we got to stop doing this because it's not working. So I was employed 2 years by the Glen Lake Association, and we put all this copper sulfate in and it wasn't working. So I said, why don't we just put a pause and stop a moratorium on copper sulfate, and let's try something different. So I got on the phone to a guy by the name of Harvey Blankerspore at Hope College. He was thought to be the world's best expert on swimmer's itch. And I said to him, Harvey, would you please come up and study the problem? And let's look at it from a scientific point of view. So that's what we did. And he and his team, including our guest here, Ron Rymick, they came up and for 3 years definitively found out the life cycle of swimmer's itch and said, you know what, let's stop doing the copper sulfate and let's start trapping and relocating common mergansers. And that was the way to break the life cycle. So guess what we did for the next, how many, Ron, decades?
Several decades.
Yeah. So several decades we were live trapping, which is no easy feat, and relocating common mergansers. And we had some early success. And we measured it by this thing called snail infection rate. And so last summer, bringing it up to 2019, we did another huge study involving more than just Glen Lake. We involved Lake Leelanau and Walloon. And what we found was that there are more worms in the water species-wise than the one that cycles through common mergansers. And lo and behold, we knew that mallards were part of the problem, and we didn't know for sure if Canada geese were part of the problem, as well as mergansers. And so we not only found out that Canada geese are involved, but they're cycling through a worm that was unknown to science, like a brand new species. Like Ron was so excited when he called me. He says, Rob, I think we have a new species. I said, you're kidding me. It was probably the highlight of Ron's career to find that new species, and it was cycling through Canada geese. And so here we are today thinking all of that good work we did for decades, although it probably helped the situation in today's world, it's only taking a fractional amount of the worms out of the water. And the other exciting news is that the common mergansers that come in the spring and fall, these are adult birds. We can't live trap and relocate them. And we always wondered, are they contributing to the itch? And guess what? They are. So we're in a quandary right now, and we are closing down the shop of live trapping and relocating. It's like 3 decades of doing the same thing over and over, and it's not working. Let's try something new. And so that's where we are. Pretty amazing.
That's an amazing journey.
It is.
So Ron, in your research, what have you discovered in terms of preventing swimmer's itch versus trying to control swimmer's itch?
Yeah. So we fully expected back in 2018, we were still mergansers, you know, that's the thing to do. And then the data started pouring in, not just from Glen Lake, but from other lakes that we had trapped and removed for more than 3 years, 3 or more years, and showing that there are worms in the water. And then it led to the research last year that Rob described. Well, fortunately, from memory, like Rob said, the copper sulfate wasn't working. And then we started to do merganser as the next sort of lake-wide control, merganser removal. And there was still lots of swimmer's itch going on, but there was such a relief that we weren't putting all this toxic chemical in the water that it kind of was like, okay, well, this is better than what we did, even though there was still swimmer's itch. And it always bothered me that we removed the birds, but there was still itch back in the day. So starting in 2017, we started to do some new research because of new technology, and it's called qPCR, quantitative polymerase chain reaction. In 2015, a landmark publication came out where you could take a water sample of a known volume and you could extract the DNA from all the organisms and then amplify just the worms that cause swimmer's itch. And so you could actually count the worms in the water with this new technology. And when that happened, it absolutely blew the lid off the research. And so we said, well, let's find out. Is it time of day? What time of day is better to swim? As the day goes on, do the worms decrease? The wind, what impact does the wind have? Shallow water, deep water. What if we put a baffle up? Could we prevent them from blowing into the swim area? These are fragile worms. They're microscopic fragile worms. Could we and they sit right on the top. That's another thing we found is we took sections of water to see where most of the worms are. And sure enough, they're right in the top. Well, could we skim them off the swim area with like you do on your pool if you have pollen or something? And so we did a lot of research funded largely by Glen Lake and other lakes, Lake Leelanau and Lyme and Walloon and those lakes. But that research led to us being to a point now where we've learned so much that if people know what we've learned, if we educate them well, they're going to be able to go swimming with their kids and grandkids and not ruin their vacation because of swimmer's itch, because there's certain prevention strategies that you can use. And I think a good analogy, mosquitoes, how we deal with mosquitoes. We don't try to take the whole forest and get rid of all the mosquitoes in the forest. For one, we know that the mosquitoes are pretty important, and people don't realize this, and if you hate swimmer's itch, you're not going to like what I'm going to say, but these are actually these worms are actually a food source for the aquatic ecosystem. But instead, we attack mosquitoes by a number of different ways, protecting our skin with either cream, burning some candles, doing a little area, and so on. And so anyway, we have come up with lots of different things that we've learned because of the new technology that we think and believe that if people know and use some of these techniques, that they're going to be able to swim without ruining their vacation due to swimmer's itch.
Hey, Ron, I got a question.
Yeah.
So we used to listen to the snails tell the story via the snail infection rate. So now we got a new sort of megaphone of information, and that's the qPCR. Is that correct? That we're not listening to the snails and the story they're telling. We're listening to a machine that counts worms in the water. Is that what you're saying?
Exactly. And if you think about the mosquito analogy again, we're not asking how many little ponds you have where the mosquitoes could breed. That would be the snails. We're asking how many mosquitoes are in the air, because we want to have a barbecue out here on our deck, and we don't really care how many ponds there are around or rivers. We want to know how many mosquitoes there are in the air. And that's what qPCR does. It actually measures the things that are in the water right now that if you go swimming are going to cause swimmer's itch. So it's a wonderful technology that is just, and so we've developed, in 2018, we published a paper that not only can we count the worms, now we can count the different species of worms. And so we can know, oh, you have this many worms, but 50% of them are from this species or this species or this species, which led to all the research in 2019 that Rob described and all of the discoveries that we made. So it's quite exciting, yeah, from a scientific standpoint, but it's also exciting because we believe we're at a point now where we can prevent swimmer's itch with using some things that aren't going to destroy or aren't going to be obnoxious.
Great. So as a swimmer, Rob, can you start us off? What are some of those prevention strategies I, as a swimmer, could use to avoid getting swimmer's itch?
Well, Laura, you and I both know we spend a lot of time on the water, in the water, around the water.
Mhm.
And we both kind of look at each other and kind of cross check and say, are we going to get nailed by swimmer's itch if we go and snorkel over this aquatic garden? And so we're always on edge, aren't we? Yeah. So
You go. No, you go. You go.
So I think, first and foremost, you want to physically distance yourself from the worms when you're in the water. If the worms can't get at you and they're in the water, I don't care how many worms are in the water, because I can swim, and as long as I'm not having those worms touch my skin, then I'm likely to be preventing myself from getting itch. So Ron, I'm going to give him credit on this, and I do it occasionally, is you wear a fabric over your skin when you swim. So for an example, the thing that seems to be catching on in the fashion world for swimming, since I was a competitive swimmer, I know about these things I see in catalogs. They're selling these kind of swim suits that cover most of your body, except for your hands, your face, and your feet. And so if you wear this swimsuit, or some people call them rash guards, or there's even some connections to the brand name Eco Stinger, and this is where people in Australia swimming over the barrier reef don't want to get stung by jellyfish, so they wear these suits so they don't get stung. You can avoid swimmer's itch just by wearing the right kind of suit. And that's one of the prevention strategies we're really going to try to campaign for. You don't have to wear the suit all day long. I mean, you go in the water, you got your suit on, you come out, you take it off. It's not that hard to do. It's much like mosquitoes. Ron, going back to your idea, if you don't want mosquitoes buzzing around your head and nailing you in the woods, you wear a net around your hat so that you have mosquito netting. So that's one way, Laura, and there's others.
What other ways would you recommend, Ron, for avoiding swimmer's itch?
To play off of that too, a study just came out from the American Medical Association about putting sunscreen on our skin. And after the first application, there were 7 chemicals that were found above the recommended level in our bloodstream from one application of sunscreen. So I think of my 2 granddaughters, 1 and 3, and we're over on Lime Lake. And I think, lather them up with sunscreen, but yet to know that, oh, those chemicals, which we don't know the impact, going into their blood. Well, this rash guard or the swimsuit that Rob was talking about, it has a UPF, I think that's what it's called. Anyway, the sun's rays, it's like 98% protective. So you don't have to worry about that as well. So just on their face. But anyway, we have some initial data that show that a baffle that hangs down in the water, it's actually a baffle for oil spills in the ocean. And so just a simple baffle system prevents them from blowing in if you have like an onshore wind. If you swim in the afternoon, you're less likely. If you swim with an offshore wind, you're way less likely. We also have we've shown that these skimmers, and these are things that are made for pools. We just modified it with a net that would trap the larvae. If you skim the area, take 5 minutes and skim the swim area, you're going to get rid of most of the the worms that are, and they're people should know this, they're released in the morning. As soon as the sun comes up, the snails release their day's worth of larvae, and then they just float around. And so if you just go out there and skim, you know, as long as there's not an onshore wind, you're going to take care of a big part of your problem, and it's not a lot of work and not expensive. So those are just some of the things. And, you know, I know some people are still working on creams. They haven't been tested scientifically, but we'd like to test creams as well. And if there's a cream that people can put on, you know, something like that too. So.
Hey, Ron, I see that you have Glen Lake behind you, and the scene is such that it reminds me, and Laura's question is, do we avoid swimmer's itch or prevent it from attacking us if we're out in the open water, if we swim well away from the shore?
Yep, that's a good question. And we did a study in 2018 on that. And we took water samples on a straight line away, you know, on an offshore wind, and then a straight line on it coming into the water. And we found that with an offshore wind, you get out and they disperse. And so you're way less risk if you're a little bit further out. But then we also found that if you're on an onshore wind, in the first half of meter, so if you're this close to shore where the water is,
yeah,
the worms are piled up there. So where is my 2-year-old granddaughter gonna? Well, she's puddling in the water right there. And so, but if I know that, then, you know, we could have even just those rash guards Rob's talking about. You can get pants, you can get tops, you can get the full length. You know, so there's different. I just make sure that, okay, hey, I don't want you, the wind's on shore, I don't want you playing right there, you know, and do something different for that. And it does. Here's another thing we haven't really talked about. It takes between 44 seconds and 4 minutes, I believe, for the worm to actually get into your skin. So I should say the average is 4 minutes. So let's say I want to walk out to my boat and get my boat. Do I have to put all this stuff on to go out there and get that? No, I could probably walk out, get the boat, bring it back, and then towel down, because they have a sucker that attaches, and then they crawl on your skin until they find a hair follicle, and then they go in there. So toweling off, actually, if you're just going to go in and out, or, hey, I want to jump in and grab something, you don't need to put the waders on. If you know this information, you can prevent swimmer's itch.
So toweling off really helps. I always thought that they burrowed into you in the water.
They do, but it takes average of 4 minutes. So if you're just going to if you're going to be in the water for a while, yeah, then your toweling off really didn't do any good because they burrowed in while you were in the water. I'm saying if you're just going to go in and go in and grab a ball, or, you know, whatever, that if you know that, you don't have to put my waders on just because I'm going to go in the water for a minute. You could just towel off afterwards.
Well, it sounds like there's a lot of different things we can do to, you know, keep ourselves from getting swimmer's itch. What happens? What do we do if we do get a case of swimmer's itch? Where should we report that?
Yeah, so I know, Rob, we're actually working with Glen Lake Association, and I work with Dr. Patrick Hannington at the University of Alberta. And his website, we're modifying that. There's a QR code for your phone, so you could just take your phone out, hit that code, bring you right to the site and report a case. But also, I think Glen Lake might have specific directions for your lake, Rob.
Yep. We're going to work together with you on our form that in the last 3 or 4 years people have been going to on our website to report a case, that we're going to add some additional information, Laura, so that when you check in and say, yeah, I got a case, well, here's some additional questions. Did you try a rash guard? Did you swim in the morning? Did you swim far away from shore? Did you try a baffle? Did you use a skimmer? Did you put some creams on? We want to actually learn from people what it is that is their magic for never getting the itch. Because you talk to people on Glen Lake, and this is just mind-boggling for me. Mind-boggling. How can you be swimming in lake water where I get the itch like crazy, and you go in that same water at the same time and not get itch? That, to me, Ron, we got to do some research on that. Like,
Oh, yeah.
what is it in my DNA that makes me susceptible? And what is it in Laura's DNA that says, you know, it doesn't bother me one bit? What's wrong with you, Rob?
So, so the twist on that is, and this comes from Dr. Hannington, is that, and he's an immunologist, is that it's possible that because the human worms, that the schistosomes that go into humans, they don't make a red spot either. So it's quite possible that those worms are still going into Laura. They're just going in further. And your immune system is actually working and stopping them at the epidermis and killing them, whereas they're going in a little further there. So you just never know.
Yeah.
Does that mean they're going into my bloodstream?
No, no, not at this point. No, we don't want to be alarmist on that. There was a study done in France where one that went to a cow actually now has gotten into humans. But that's a mammal to mammal versus a bird to mammal would be a bigger jump. So
I actually see an occasional little bump on me, but it doesn't itch, and it doesn't have the histamine response that other people do around that little bump. It's just a little tiny bump, and if you don't know what you're looking for, you would hardly even notice it, but
right.
I see it. It just doesn't, it doesn't itch.
Right. Yep.
Okay, so do you guys think, based on your research, that we could actually bring the number of swimmer's itch cases down in this area?
Yeah, let me start off by saying that we've spent so much time and energy, literally since the 50s, either with copper sulfate or live trapping mergansers, and looking at snails telling us the story that, yeah, we reduced infection rate in the snails and we were still getting people with itch, that we kind of lost track of the real game plan here. And the ultimate game plan, as you suggest, Laura, is can we get the number of swimmer's itch cases down and not have all this lake-wide control effort, which, by the way, is expensive. The Glen Lake Association has spent multi-thousands to try to get a lake-wide control program that was successful and effective. And here we go. We're in this 2020. It's all on the swimmer to make sure that when you go swimming, you don't get itch. And Ron, what's the phrase? You don't have to.
Yes, from C. Everett Koop back in when we were all afraid of HIV, and he said, we've learned enough now where you don't have to get AIDS if you don't want to. And we're at a stage now where you really don't have to get swimmer's itch if you don't want to, and you can swim. I have 2 granddaughters who I love dearly, and we're on Lime Lake, your neighbor, and they're going to go swimming this summer and in our lake. And last summer they got swimmer's itch after 5 years of trapping mergansers. And we're not going to trap anymore, but they're going to go swimming, and I'm convinced they're not going to get swimmer's itch next year, this coming summer.
You're really invested in this, aren't you?
Oh yeah, I believe it, and it's going to save lake associations so much money, and be it that I think the money needs to go towards important things as well, like septics or nutrient loading, invasive species.
Right.
There's just so many demands on our dollars as a lake association. And I think it'd be nice to have a breather from the swimmer's itch, but yet we still want to reduce swimmer's itch cases. And I believe we're going to do that. Yep.
Well, I'll be interested to hear how it goes this summer with all this new knowledge. What new projects do you have lined up for this year? Either of you.
Yeah. We've learned so much with last year's 3 lake study that I believe we're going to continue that for another year to answer different questions, just as important. And then we also are looking at, as Rob suggested, we want to put some science behind these prevention strategies, so that, and again, to educate people so that they can say, well, if I do this, if I burn citronella candles, that's going to take care of 80% of my mosquitoes on my deck or whatever. We want to put some numbers, some real science behind it, because most of it's anecdotal at this point.
Right.
And so we're doing some studies on that as well.
Mm-hmm.
So I have this perfect concept in my head. All swimmers, please report to me. All right, so now I have all the swimmers who ever swim in Glen Lake, in one room and I say to them, I want you to try some of these strategies, be serious about it, really try to not get swimmer's itch. And at the end of the summer, call all those people back and say, all right, how did it work? Was it effective? Did you always used to get itch and now you got a prevention strategy that you used or combination of strategies? And say to me with a smile on your face, I did not get swimmer's itch in Glen Lake and I swam the whole summer. That to me is the epitome of where we need to be if swimmers will take responsibility. If I feel like there's a swimmer who gets swimmer's itch and tried the prevention strategies and it doesn't work, we want to be upfront and say to ourselves, well, maybe that's something we need to learn from. And so I think this feedback that we're going to need from swimmers this summer is important. I want to make sure that we work hard to get that kind of data. And I want to make sure that when we promote a prevention strategy, that it really works.
Mm-hmm.
I love that idea, Rob, of your survey online when people report a case, of you asking these follow-up questions, because not only are you gaining that data, but you're reminding them very, not so subtly, what the strategies are.
Yeah, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
And I've got some questions. I know Ron has given us some good ideas for how to prevent swimmer's itch, but I'm not sure they all work the best. But I think that it's just like going back to mosquitoes, Ron. If I burn the candles, I wear mosquito netting, and I put on mosquito repellent, and I don't go where the mosquitoes are really high in numbers, like in a swamp or someplace, and I still get a mosquito bite or two, I'm happy with that. But if I go bare skinned, nothing but a pair of shorts on, bare legs, bare upper body, into a swamp where there's mosquitoes like high numbers, and I get mosquito bites, and I walk out of the woods and say, can't you do something about the mosquitoes? It's sort of like, people have to understand that they got to take responsibility. And that is a shift from where we've been.
Right.
We have been in a position where the swimmers depended on and hoped that the lake association would take care of the problem. And we're now shifting that to saying, swimmers, you got to do your part to make this work. And if you do, and you communicate to us how well it's going, I think we'll be on the road to reducing itch cases by a large number.
Mm-hmm. Swim smart.
Yes.
Swim smart.
What's your swimming IQ, I asked.
Right. I love that analogy with the mosquitoes, because it sounds ridiculous that we would go into a swamp with, not much covering and say, can't you do something about the mosquitoes? That just sounds ludicrous.
Right.
Yeah, and what's
yet,
even more, when you think about it, most top scientists in this field don't believe biologically that you'll be able to be effective long-term with removing the mergansers, because one merganser pooping once in front of your place could infect 200 snails, and then each snail every day kicks out 2,000 to 3,000 of the worms that cause swimmer's itch for the whole summer. And so the numbers are just astronomical when you think about it. So the spring and fall, you got a group of mergansers, they swim by, they poop, your snails are infected. Next year, you got thousands of those larvae in the water. And so it's not as effective as what we'd hoped. And we think this is a better way.
It is. I'm excited.
Yeah, we are.
How about you, Laura? Are you excited?
I can tell, yes, this is great news, and it really helps us swimmers feel like we have a sense of control over the situation, and that we've gained so much knowledge about what we're dealing with.
And I would add that we do have some new things on the horizon that we haven't talked about. And so I'm not going to talk about them now because they're untested, but we are always adding some new things that you'll be excited about, I think. So
we'll save that for a future interview.
There you go.
That's so typical of you, Ron, to leave us in suspense. I've known this guy for 40 years now, and he always leaves you with, I got one more idea.
I do.
In the next episode.
Yeah.
Well, Rob and Ron, this has been really interesting and informative. We thank you for all the work that you've done over the years in our lakes in northern Michigan, trying to improve the water quality and the experience for all of us. And thank you for your time today.
You're welcome.
Welcome. Thank you all.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks.
Yes. This has been Laura Wiesen from GLA News in Glen Arbor, Michigan, wishing you a great day. Be safe and swim smart.